I really thank you all for coming. This is a new format, like I said. How many of you like this format where we're a little more relaxed and we don't have to, remember we would have our meeting, rush through it, have the keynote speak really quickly and get out of here because it was at night and there wasn't time for questions and answers and all that stuff sufficiently. So I hope you like this format. How many of you prefer this format? Saturday morning, afternoon presentations and so on. It's hard to see. Okay. So this is what AFLO does, Alliance for Life Ontario, when they get together, which is where we got the idea. Amanda, are you all set? Alrighty, okay, let me bring up what I wrote down about you here. Okay, so this is what Amanda sent to me. Amanda is a Canadian writer, speaker, and ethics educator who works at the intersection of culture, healthcare, and human dignity. She serves as the Director of Ethics for Physicians for Life and is the founder of Dying to Meet You, a project focused on improving how Canadians talk about death and dying. With experience in journalism, public policy, and bioethics, and advanced studies in philosophy and theology, Amanda is known for bringing clarity, compassion, and hope to complex and sensitive public conversations. So like I said, I first met Amanda at the Alliance for Life meeting last year. She truly is an advocate for life, an advocate for people. She's full of energy. And so that was why she's here, is because, I was inspired that and I suggested to our board, let's bring her here. She's good. And she focuses on the human dimension. You'll hear some of us talk about, the political dimension and this bill and that bill and so on. That's all important. But she gets right in there with the one-on-one relationship, human connection. So Amanda, thank you for traveling to Thunder Bay and coming and doing this presentation for us. Are you going to use this?
Now, how's this sounding? Tonka, is it great? Okay, let's move this slightly to the side. Okay. All right, good afternoon, everyone. It's a joy to be here with you because preventing euthanasia and encouraging hope is my life's mission. Yes?
I forgot one thing. I apologize again for my wrongness. You have a recipe card on the table and some pens. While Amanda is speaking, if you want to write down a question for her, please do, and Rob will come and get them later to facilitate questions and answers.
Great, so raise your hand if you have a completed cue card that you want to submit a Q&A submission for. Thank you so much for that, Debbie, and to Rob for collecting them. All right, so preventing euthanasia and encouraging hope is what I am most passionate about. And to start, you might be wondering what one of the youngest people in the room is doing, dedicating her life to this. It's great to see we do have all ages here, though. It's a good intergenerational AGM. When I think about what it is that led me to this mission, I think that it is in part the quite ordinary experiences that I had with older adults who spoke into my life and who helped shape me. So the first experience was with my grandfather. My grandfather lived with my family for several years. While I was in high school and university, he was quite elderly by then. He was in his late 80s and early 90s. And this experience really marked me. Having him at our family table, he was my intellectual sparring partner. I would leave my university papers on his pillow and he would leave the newspapers with things circled on mine. It was really sweet. We would go on granddaughter dates to Italian restaurants. He really liked Shirley Temples and I would always make sure that he got maraschino cherries, a whole extra bowl of them, and he was deaf. So when the bowl arrived, he just knew that he could count on me as his fellow co-conspirator in the maraschino cherry department. So we were very close, and he lived with us in those later years when my grandmother, his wife, had dementia, and she was in a place living and getting special care as she lived with dementia. And I would notice that he would dress up really smart and sharp. He had come from Poland to Canada. and he would go and visit her every single day. And of course, she would forget the visit, like that. And of course, this really marks us when we first see the experience of dementia, especially in someone who's close to us. And I saw his steadfastness, I saw the love he showed her no matter what. And even if I would have never put it this way when I was a teenager, I know the impression that that made on me was, I hope I am loved like this. Because that's a love you can count on. And it was this model of fidelity and of true love that is reliable, that is solid. And so my grandfather lived and died a natural death, thankfully a year before euthanasia was brought into our country. And I saw his experiences at end of life. I saw him wondering, why haven't I died yet? Or even sometimes tempted to say, well, just kill me, I'm ready, it's over. And I saw that kind of drama in his own heart, and I also saw that ebb and flow of circumstances and emotions. And so it started to affect me when our government was discussing euthanasia, so-called medical assistance in dying, just for people whose deaths are reasonably foreseeable. Because especially for anyone in their 80s or 90s, it's especially reasonably foreseeable. Of course, it is for all of us. But we know that this imminent kind of sense of death became a basis for exclusion, basically, for having a criteria by which some people could have their life prematurely ended. And that really concerned me. I was also so formed and impacted by a couple Holocaust survivors, because when I was 18, I had the opportunity to travel on the March of Remembrance and Hope Holocaust study trip to Germany and Poland with two Holocaust survivors, Pinchas and Fegi, from Toronto. And they were going year after year back to Germany and Poland to the sites of their trauma, being on a bus for 10 days with 18 to 30-year-olds in order to tell their stories about losing their families, about survival. And to me, as a young person, this really helped to, in a certain sense, relativize my own suffering. Whatever I was going through, I had to have Fegi and Pinchas in the back of my mind and think about the perspective that it gave me to remember their stories, their witness, and that they thought it was worth it to travel with us, to eat and drink with us, and to kind of have all of those experiences. But then again, the government is talking about euthanasia for people whose deaths are reasonably foreseeable. So when I thought about this, that was not an abstraction. That criteria had faces and names. And so I thought, this concerns people like me and families like mine. Of course, we've seen a total transformation of the language over the years, beginning with euthanasia, which is already a euphemism from Greek, meaning a good death, to assisted suicide. But of course, generally, we try to prevent suicide. Now in Canada, we have a two-tier society where some people are met with suicide prevention and others are offered suicide assistance. That's a contradiction. Why do some people get suicide prevention and others are offered suicide assistance? So then it became physician-assisted suicide, because at least if there was going to be assisted suicide, it would be medicalized. But even eclipsing the doctor from the process, it became medical assistance in dying, and now has become abbreviated to this acronym, MAID. And this is really deadening the consciences of those across our country. But I want to come back to this fact of criteria, because the fact of having criteria, the purported rationality by which some people qualify to have their life prematurely ended by a doctor or nurse through a lethal injection within 15 minutes, the fact of having criteria at all is the problem. And here's why. Because simply fitting the criteria already kills the person. And even if you would never go through with it, just to be told that you qualify for a state-sponsored suicide is already shattering and is having a toll on the self-esteem, most especially of the elderly, of older adults in our communities, because it's sending a social message that there's a category of human beings who could just not be here. That's the problem. Now, I have been following this issue for quite some time, even before it had been legalized nationwide in 2016. I actually went to a Dying with Dignity town hall as it was being discussed. In the early days, I like to say that I would drink their coffee but not their Kool-Aid at these meetings, and they always wondered what a young university student was doing at these town halls. But I went to this town hall that was actually hosted in a retirement residence by Dying with Dignity. And there was, of course, a very pro-euthanasia bias and slant among all the panelists at the front of the room, and they were going on and on about this criteria, this rationale of a grievous and irremediable condition. You won't get better. And reasonably foreseeable death. On and on the speaker went about this until finally it came to the time of Q&A. And I'll never forget, there was a woman at the back of the room and she was waving her hand. She says, "Excuse me, but I do not believe that there is any suffering that is irredeemable." And the speaker looked confused. But the woman thought she had said irredeemable, not irremediable. And I thought, how interesting, because this shows the chasm between those who are promoting euthanasia, who see that maybe there is no sense to suffering, that maybe life becomes not very worthwhile, and a woman who is closer to living that experience herself, who says, wait a minute, there's a reason I wake up every day. Wait a minute, I know who I am. Interesting. So the fact of having criteria sends a social message, and we cannot tolerate any occasion where life is discarded, dismissed, or discounted. And yet, a very important point, in our culture, we are very aware of how other people have the capacity to harm us, to disrespect us, to mistreat us, to dehumanize us. We are all quite aware that respect involves treating others well, that we ought to look at people a certain way. But what we lack and where we struggle is applying those same standards and ideals to ourselves. To ourselves. Can we look at ourselves the same way? Or do we also face that temptation underlying the euthanasia temptation, which is a temptation to self-rejection, to treating ourselves, to having self-talk that we would never tolerate speaking aloud to others. And I remember I actually had the opportunity, in addition to having traveled on a Holocaust study trip when I was 18, I have since had the opportunity to visit a few of the former Nazi euthanasia memorial sites. There were 6 euthanasia killing sites, and they've all become memorial museums throughout Germany and Austria. And I went to one of them, a castle, Hartheim Castle, where 18,000 mostly children had been euthanized. And they have a whole exhibit there on the value of life and the history of eugenics and the history of euthanasia, a whole museum dedicated to it. Professionals go there, students go there. They don't get a lot of international visitors, but they did translate everything into English. And so I spent the day there, and I ran into some high schoolers, and I asked them at the end of their whole visit, do you think there's ever a circumstance in which euthanasia is justified now? And one of the students said, yes, when the person themselves asks for it. That was the conclusion at the end of studying the history of Nazi euthanasia, that the only problem was a lack of consent on the part of the victims. And this really troubled me. I was honestly kind of tossing and turning, wondering, what do I have to say to that? And that's what brought home this clarity that, do we have the humility to recognize when we dehumanize our very selves? And that the issues of our time perhaps are more and more self-harm of euthanasia and of personal dehumanization than of only the dehumanization of others. But now I want to come to the fundamental and existential questions of why are people asking for euthanasia in our country? Why has euthanasia gone from exceptional to routine, from for the most extenuating of circumstances to people's minds, to now almost romanticized and glamorized as the ideal form of dying, as if you almost have to give an excuse for why you wouldn't want to choose this, why you wouldn't want to assert control and schedule and describe the circumstances you'd like for your own death. Now in Canada, as many of you will be aware, 1 in 20 deaths is caused by the doctor or nurse directly ending the patient's life at their request. And more than 100,000 have been euthanized since legalization in 2016, over this past decade. So how did we get here? And why has this become such a temptation? When we look at the reasons why people are requesting euthanasia, the government does keep pretty good data on this. We have a Health Canada report every year, Health Canada annual report on MAID. And in that report, there's a list of all the kinds of suffering by people's own admission. I mean, people who are actually asking for it and going through with it. And interestingly, while many people would think that it's pain and agony or physical pain, that doesn't even make the top 5 of this list of the kinds of suffering people say motivate their request. So what is it? The number 1 kind of suffering leading people to request MAID is an inability to engage in meaningful life activities. Inability to engage in meaningful life activities. And the second is an inability to perform the daily activities of personal care, followed by loss of dignity, loss of independence, and an existential distress, a kind of malaise about the future. Now, even before euthanasia had been legalized in Canada, I had a friend of mine who grew up in a pretty secular family, and her mother used to say, if I'm ever suffering, I know I would want a doctor to end my life. And my friend, even though it was a secular household, found this rather upsetting as a teenager, hearing her mother speak this way. And so she mustered the courage to address it with her. And she said, Mom, it's really affecting me. Why do you keep talking like this? Saying if you were going through something, you would ask for assisted suicide. And the mother said, well, if I'm in a great deal of pain, or perhaps I don't have my wits about me, I might say something really mean and hurtful, and then no one would love me. And since my friend was a teenager, she had the perfect teenage girl response, and she said, Mom, you already do that, and I still love you. But this question, this cry of the heart, who will love me this way? And the request for euthanasia betrays the insecurity that I will have anyone to love me in whatever circumstances or conditions I may come to. And this is a very important point, because if the answer to the question, who will love me in this condition that I anticipate and that I fear, if the response is no one, then euthanasia is a means to preempt hearing that answer, because that would be too tragic to bear. So we have our work cut out for us, because we have to be the one who is going to love and to preempt that objection that there could be no one to love me in whatever I am going through. Now, this next one about independence. I remember reading online that someone who uses a wheelchair was going to Shoppers to pick up some Tylenol, and a perfect stranger said to him, man, I couldn't do what you do. Looked down at him in his wheelchair, and the man looked up at him and said, what are you talking about? I'm just picking up some Tylenol. And this perfect stranger said to him, nah, if I had to use a wheelchair like that, I'd rather be dead. So it's unlikely that people would say this openly, but how many people have this kind of thought lurking beneath the surface? That if I could no longer do this or that, if I need help going to the washroom, if I'm no longer able to drive, that's a big one. If I'm no longer able to drive, if I'm no longer to take vacations in the winter, my life is over. Just end it. And this really makes us all a lot more precarious, because even if some would say, that's just my view, I'm not implying that others have to have the same judgment. The fact of imposing this kind of criteria on the value of your own life based on your circumstances or your abilities implies, without being able to get around it, it implies a social judgment about what lives are worth living, about what makes life worthwhile after all. Why are people participating in euthanasia or acquiescing to it? Family members, doctors. Many doctors don't believe they're doing an evil thing. They think that this is helpful, meaningful work. And I've read the memoirs of some euthanasia doctors in Canada. One euthanasia doctor actually addresses the Hippocratic Oath in her memoir. She says, we always saw killing as a form of harm, but now I don't see it that way. It's the underlying illness that is ending the life, and I'm just fulfilling the patient's wishes. I'm just doing what they want. And so we've seen a complete inversion. Many times I get asked about the Hippocratic Oath. What happened to first do no harm? Well, not all is progress in our age. We have to get to the more fundamental question. First, what is harm? First, what is harm? What does it mean to actually harm someone or ourselves? And why not? Why not harm ourselves? Why not suicide? These are the very fundamental existential questions that we have to give attention to, that this euthanasia crisis cries out for. I travel across Canada and increasingly around the world, and not a day goes by that I do not hear a personal story of someone who is affected by euthanasia, who's lost someone to it, who's contemplating it. This is daily. This is daily, and it is wreaking so much havoc on families, as you know. A lot of friction between families, a lot of people feel cut out, a lot of secrecy in families. Family members who are known or presumed to oppose euthanasia being cut out, not being told details, not being invited into the process, and it's so painful, it's so wounding. I had someone share with me that he was thinking of going to visit a serious friend and mentor who had really shaped him throughout his life. He was getting on a plane to go visit him in the state in which he lived. This was in the US. And he said, I'm getting on a plane to go see him. This man has been a mentor to me. I don't want my last interactions with him to be negative, and I don't want to be kicked out of the room. I don't want him to think that I came here to fight with him. And so I encouraged this man and I said, well, say that. You can go to this man and say, I didn't come here to fight with you. I came here to fight for you. And this is an important point because I want to embolden you, you who are pro-life leaders, to know with confidence that mounting resistance to what is a form of suicidal ideation is always an act of love. Mounting resistance to what is a form of suicidal ideation is always an act of love. You cannot lose, even if a person misuses their freedom according to our estimation of things. Even if they do that, you will not have failed if you pushed back and you said something to the effect of, I love you too much to see you go through with this, or I can't bear the thought of someone hurting you. These are the ways we speak, where we stake our very selves on the person in question and we let them know that their lives and deaths affect us. Because when someone is suffering, when we are suffering, when we are facing things, that horizon of transcendence collapses and we close in on ourselves. So we need the other to remind us, to shake us out of ourselves, to remind us of this horizon of transcendence, that our lives are not just our own. So even if the person misuses their freedom, you cannot fail if you have loved the person well until the very end. And even if they're dying by euthanasia, don't you think it would be good for them to have one person in their mind coming to mind, well, that person didn't want me to do it? That's a good thought. Because We don't want indifference. None of us want people's indifference. We want their love. One of the biggest concerns among people is the fear of being a burden. I hear this very often, and I work with people on this challenge in our own hearts. Fear of being a burden. But what the feeling of being a burden is a kind of false humility. And I can say it's a false humility because nobody who's worried about being a burden wants anyone to agree with them that they are. You don't want anyone to concur with that one. So if you're saying, I'm worried about being a burden, you're waiting for someone to say, oh, but you're not a burden. You're a joy. What can I do for you? What do you need? You are a gift. So to say that you're going to worry about being a burden is actually kind of self-protective, but not sincere, because nobody really wants that to be affirmed. There's a beautiful essay titled, I Want to Burden My Loved Ones, in which a father is reflecting on all the things he did for his children, and he said, darn right, I'm going to be a burden to them. That's how this goes. How many of you are familiar with Robert Munsch and his best-selling children's books? He's like the most loved Canadian author. Raise your hand high if you know Robert Munsch. Okay. And if you grew up with your children or grandchildren hearing stories like Love You Forever. Yeah? Love You Forever is the most quintessential story of the circle of life, right? It is a total classic. I think it sold 40 million copies. That's like about as many as we have citizens. Of course, it's sold all over North America. And what happens in Love You Forever? Of course, the mother has a newborn baby, and she starts singing this lullaby to him. I'll love you forever, I'll like you for always, as long as you're living, my baby you'll be. He grows up, terrible twos, writing on the walls. She sings him the lullaby. He's a teenager, he listens to loud music, he has gum in his hair. Still, she sings, I'll love you forever, I'll like you for always, as long as you're living, my baby you'll be. He's a grown man. And eventually his mother becomes quite elderly and frail, and she summons him to come and visit her. And she's not able to sing the lullaby anymore because she's so old and so weak. And so he sings it to her, I'll love you forever, I'll like you for always, as long as you're living, my mommy you'll be. And of course the book movingly ends with him going and singing the song to his newborn daughter. The most quintessential circle of life love story of unconditional love. And so how shocking was it to Canadians to hear in September Robert Munsch say that he wants to sign up for MAID? I remember reading that and my heart just breaking. I remember him coming to my school and reading stories aloud. He performed in front of so many children. His visits to schools inspired a lot of the books. He would even use the children's real names in some of the books to honor their contributions. He stayed with families as he traveled in order to get good material around the table. What a life. And so I became so curious about him. What could lead to this discordance? What could lead to this rupture? And I started to watch every video of his. I started to read every article about his. I read about his crises with alcohol addiction, with drug use. Even while he was becoming a well-loved children's author, there had been someone who died by suicide in his family. He suffered a lot. He had been in seminary for several years, training to be a priest, and then he got married. And so in this New York Times article that announced that Robert Munsch was thinking of dying by MAID, the journalist who wrote it expressed that his biggest fear was that he would become, in his words, a turnip or a lump. He was so afraid with Parkinson's and dementia that his life would have no sense. So again, who was Robert Munsch? What led to this kind of conclusion? And I started to even become curious about what inspired him to write the book Love You Forever, after all. And you might guess that it was probably his own children. And that is true, but there is an interesting twist. Robert Munch and his wife had 2 stillborn children, one after the other. His first 2 children were stillborn. And it was those stillborn children who never took a breath in this life, who were given to him, who made him a father, who broke open his heart to that love you forever kind of love that inspired him to write the best-selling book of his career. And I think it's moving to consider that whatever Robert Munch suffers with Parkinson's, with dementia, with whatever else his old age may entail, he will never be more vulnerable or hidden, unspoken than those 2 stillborn children, who yet inspired this best-selling children's book in Canadian history. So you can remember that too. You will never become more hidden or discreet or forgotten than many of the unborn who also hold such a place in our hearts, and then so many others in your lives who have awakened you to be champions for life and for human dignity. What Robert Munch needs is someone to sing over him, "I'll love you forever, I'll like you for always." Because the euthanasia crisis is first and foremost a cry of the heart. Who will love me this way? Am I still good? Do I still belong here? And this is so important. This is not just one issue, this is every issue. When I was discerning what to dedicate my life to, where to give my efforts, I was like, okay, God, am I really gonna be known as euthanasia girl? Is this where this is going? But then I had this beautiful clarity that this is not just one issue. This is every issue. This is the question of whether or not it's good to be a person after all. And euthanasia makes us all more precarious. It makes us doubt ourselves all the more. It creates a lot of intergenerational trauma. Love says, it's good you exist. I want you to be. You have a place in the world and you belong right here with us. And euthanasia is the exact literal opposite of love, because it says maybe it's not so good for you to be here. Maybe you would be better off dead. Part of what I do through the Dying to Meet You project is I try and amplify the stories of those who are the most affected and the least represented through short films. So I think we'll show the Pain and Purpose one, Tonka, thank you. I'm gonna show a short film that engages some of these themes in their existential light, and in a way that may have a certain resonance with you. So I've released several different vignettes because I'm trying to give voice to those who are the most affected, but the least represented in our public conversations concerning euthanasia. So this is Charlie's story.
I should have been dead by now, according to the odds, and I'm not. My name is Charlie Lewis. I'm a journalist and I live in Toronto.
When was the first time you got diagnosed with an illness?
Oh, wow. I was December 3rd, 2011, 4 days before my birthday. My wife and I were going out for lunch, a place we always went, and I was standing up getting dressed, and the next thing I knew, I was on the floor. I thought, no exaggeration, I had been shot in the back. The pain was unbelievable. I couldn't move, I couldn't talk. Well, it turned out that I suffered from a terrible case of stenosis. So the spine basically will narrow in places. Mine narrowed completely, hitting all those nerves. Think of your worst trip to the dentist, but in your back. At that very moment, my entire life changed. Now I have cancer. And I found out on a Friday night at 8 o'clock. And the first thing I said is, the next time, call me on a Saturday morning, because, what am I supposed to do with this information now? And then when I made my first trip to Princess Margaret, the cancer hospital here in Toronto, all I remember is seeing all these people, young, old, whatever, all with cancer. And I was suddenly like, well, you're nobody special. When I looked at them, they were like laughing and they were talking and sharing stories. Like there was no like weeping, there was no, oh, woe is me. It's just like people saying, okay, I'll deal with this.
Did you feel like part of them?
Oh yeah, felt much like, yeah, I'm here, I'm part of you. Yeah, I share something with you guys.
What is the impact on you, having gone through cancer, of knowing that cancer is the leading underlying condition leading people to request euthanasia?
I hate to think it, but I think that their doctors are too often saying, sure, if that's what you want, it's up to you, rather than saying, I'm a doctor, this makes no damn sense. You can live with this for years without pain.
Were you eligible for euthanasia?
Oh yeah, easily. I never applied, but between my back and the cancer, I'm sure I would have had no problem.
Dying with Dignity is using the stories of people who have been victims of abuse or trauma and saying they are, in a certain sense, candidates for MAID. What do you think about that?
I think it's awful. I think it's abusive in itself. When I was a kid, I was sexually abused. I don't want to talk any more about it, but I was. So does that mean I should kill myself? This is like my father used to say about hate. Hating somebody is like taking poison and hoping the other guy dies. Why would I end my life because of the work of some, asshole who did something terrible? It just doesn't seem right. The best answer is to live your life healthily.
Tell me what motivated you to start volunteering in palliative care.
I believed that you could still get meaning out of your life in that short term. The thing with many of those people was that they were alone. Older people, their kids never visited, their husbands or wives were dead, and they were alone, right? And that's hard, being in a room, facing all this stuff. So being with them, I felt was really important. Like I felt like it's not about me, but I was really doing something for somebody else.
Do you think your own suffering made you more open to doing that?
Oh, absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because a lot of what there were people going through is suffering, and I was suffering. I'm suffering today, actually, not because of you, but because of my back. I knew what that was like. And so I felt that I could somehow relate to them, and by relating to them, I wasn't just talking through my hat. I didn't say cliches. Like, I knew they were hurting.
Why were you able to avoid the cliches?
Because I was a journalist. And I had an editor years ago say, anytime a cliche comes to your mind, find another way to say it in your own words. I never forgot that.
What is it that gave you perspective on your suffering?
Before everything of this happened, I could cycle 200 kilometers, I could go mountain climbing, I could play squash, all that. And when I was walking down the street, all I saw was healthy people, right? Then when this happened, and I was having to use a cane and having to lean against the wall, suddenly all these other people in wheelchairs or walkers bent over. I thought, where did they all come from? And they were there all the time, but I just didn't look at them. Why would I look at them, right? They're just, I've got nothing in common. Now I suddenly realize I was an ass for thinking that way, because I'm one of those people.
What do you want Canadians to know?
You may be very healthy and vibrant right now, and you walk by people who are not, and you just ignore them. But you have to know that this may happen to you someday, and you're going to need love and care. It may be happening to your parents, your children, your spouse, and they're going to need love and care. So in the meantime, start showing those people love and care.
One vignette, there are a dozen out there on dyingtomeetyou.com from all different perspectives, people living with disabilities, people living with dementia. I will show one more in just a minute, but a couple points about that. Of course, I mentioned that by people's own account, the kind of suffering motivating the request is meaning, existential, independence connected to these themes. Of course, people are living with things like ALS, cancer, Parkinson's, and I remember growing up with the Terry Fox run, obviously a major connection to this place, and thinking, even as a little kid, that if I ever get cancer, I hope I run the race of that illness something like Terry did. And now we have two rival visions in Canada: euthanasia for cancer and a marathon of hope with cancer. Euthanasia is really making everyone more precarious, because now where will young people's minds go upon hearing the word cancer? Will it go to Terry Fox, or will it go to, oh, well, now they qualify for MAID? It's a very fundamental shift that affects a lot more than we realize at first glance. And so I can say to you that I am actually personally more concerned about fitting the government's criteria for MAID than I am of getting a diagnosis, even a terminal one, because we can manage things when we are received with love, when we are truly accompanied. But if a diagnosis means that you fit the criteria of exclusion, of being discardable, that's worse than the illness itself, honestly. It's such a lack of love. And that's why just to be offered euthanasia already kills the person. It already deflates and defeats a person's sense of worth. And recently I interviewed this woman named Miriam Lancaster, who was offered euthanasia practically upon arrival to a hospital in BC. She didn't even know what was wrong with her. She hadn't even had an X-ray. It was some pretty severe, excruciating back pain, but after a month she recuperated. She went on to travel to Mexico, Cuba, and Guatemala within the year. She was on front page of the National Post, and the story was picked up by People magazine, New York Post, the Daily Mail, because life wins. We are not made for death. The next video I'm going to show brings home the intergenerational toll that euthanasia is having, because I think we don't pay enough attention to this. The ripple effect and the consequences on those who are left behind from this particular form of suicide, complex grief and intergenerational trauma. So I'm hearing more and more as a millennial from people my age who have lost their grandparents to euthanasia. This is Benjamin's story.
We're here because 2 out of my 4 grandparents died through euthanasia within 2 months of each other. Basically, one day my parents called me, and I remember I was walking, and they said, "We wanted you to know that your grandmother has decided on MAID to end her life." And I remember it vividly because I've never had that experience before where I felt like someone punched me in the gut. She was most likely going to die within a few days of natural causes. And so for me, I didn't understand why you'd want to go through with this. It just wrecked me.
2 months later, your grandmother with whom you were closest planned to pursue euthanasia as well. How did you find out?
So with my second grandmother, because I knew she was getting sick, I flew out to Vancouver to be with her. When I was in university, my grandfather had to go into assisted care, and then my grandmother needed someone, and I needed to live somewhere. So for 3 years, I actually lived with my grandmother. So we became roommates. She really became one of my closest confidants and one of my best friends. And it was when I was with her in the hospital, I was sitting beside her bedside, and I was like holding her hand, and she looked at me and she said, "I know you don't agree with this, and I know this isn't part of your values, but like, thank you for letting me do it." And I didn't know how to respond, because I don't want you to do this, but I can't. I didn't feel like I could tell you that. There's a strong guilt of like, why didn't I say something?
What message did it send to you when your grandmother opted for euthanasia?
The message it sends to me is, I'm like, did I not love you enough? Did I not love you the correct way? Did I not make you feel like you're not a burden? I'd call her bestie. Like, I'd always write in the cards to her. I'd be like, bestie. And she'd write back, oh, bestie. Like, so we'd always have these like nicknames for each other as well. And so with both of them, it just makes you ask the question of like, what did I do wrong that you would want to end it now, and that you don't want to like stay with me for like a little bit longer? If I could have had 2 more days with you, would I take that? I'm like, yes, I would have taken that over anything, because now I don't have you. It's like, I'm wondering, what could I have said? What could I have done to make you feel like a day, 2 days, 3 days is worth it? Even if you can't talk, like even if your eyes are closed, you know, even if I just get to like hold your hand, kiss your forehead, stroke your hair, be in your presence, remember your life, remember our memories with you in the room, I think it's worth it.
It's always painful to lose the people we love. What difference does it make to lose someone through medical assistance in dying?
it's the choice of maid that hurts. With my grandfathers, I couldn't have done anything about them passing. That was just the natural time for them to go. But when you choose it, then you feel like there's something I could have done, and it impacts multiple generations.
Benjamin, you mentioned the sense of regret you had over having not discussed these topics earlier with your grandmother. When is the time to do so?
There's never a good time to have that conversation. And so if there's never a good time to have it, then now is the best time to have it. And you just need to engage and realize that you mean more to your grandparents than you probably know. They've been with you since birth. They held you as a baby. Your opinion of what they decide, what their choices, there's validity to that. I think as a grandchild, sometimes we don't feel the validity that we can tell our grandparents how we feel about the decisions because of that generational gap that is in there. But actually, I think it matters. The conversation might even be painful to have, but it won't be more painful than the pain you feel when that person chooses MAID or euthanasia.
When a grandchild finds out that his or her grandmother is thinking of euthanasia, what can they do?
How loving is it? You see it in movies where it's like, I just want to spend my whole life with you. Every breath, every moment, all these things. And everyone's like, oh, like I just want to be there with you. And there's something about that. And then basically what you're doing to your grandparent is you're doing a similar thing as a love story where you're saying to them, I just want to be with you for every moment till every last breath. And I just don't know why that would be a bad thing for them to hear, because they're just going to feel so loved by you that you want to be with them till that last breath. And so you can't lose anything by telling them how much you love them and you want to be with them.
So you can't lose anything, but we risk ourselves by doing this, and that is costly, but it's so worth it. I really love how Benjamin says, it's the choice of MAID that hurts. That makes the point, I think, quite understandably, that even a secular audience could understand what that means. So I hope that you've had a chance to jot down some questions. If you have, you can raise your hand and they'll be collected, and we'll take some time for those. Yeah, this is creating an intergenerational toll. This is a cultural shift. Thanks for collecting those. The challenge with these adult children and grandchildren speaking out is, you know what they're sometimes met with? You're selfish. You're selfish for wanting your loved one to be alive. This isn't about you, it was their choice. So how painful, after suffering that kind of loss, to be met with that lack of understanding. It's very difficult. But step by step, coming alongside, people are willing to share. And with that video, Benjamin's story has been seen all across Canada and internationally, and many articles have been written about it. This is how we shift culture. And in fact, I showed it at a pro-life event like this, and someone reached out to me by email, and then we met over Zoom, and then we met in person. And she said, Benjamin's story really spoke to me. I had the same experience with my grandmother. If you ever want to make a video with me, I'm an open book, I'm willing. And so just last Friday, I was recording her story. And she was speaking about how she adored her grandmother, so much so that she named her first child after this grandmother. But then several years after her daughter was born, her grandmother opted for MAID. And she was starting to wonder, do I change my daughter's name? What is this going to mean for our memories of her?
It's Amanda. It's Amanda.
Yep, and Rob, right?
Yes.
Great.
Awesome. Thank you so much for presenting this. I certainly opened my eyes to a few insights I hadn't thought of it before. And it seems like brother is here as well. Some good challenge in the past. love to get your perspective on this one situation and any advice you might have for these individuals. Someone shares, my brother who's in a wheelchair and has suffered much but still wants to live his life to the end. He has been offered more than once MAID and has refused each time. He lives in a nursing home facility, and that is the real sad issue. And so they're just wondering, like, what's going on? Are these doctors paid to keep offering this? Are they going to risk losing their jobs if they don't keep offering MAID? Like, what should this family do? Do you have any insights?
The problem with legalizing euthanasia and entrenching it in our healthcare system is that it is seen as something available for everyone who is eligible. And of course, the eligibility has expanded because once legalized, it has to be expanded on the grounds of equality. But this is not a benefit. This is not something about which we should use the term eligibility at all, because really, some people are being looked at differently. If you or I went into the hospital versus this person, we would be treated completely differently, and that's not fair. That's not respectful of our fundamental human equality. So the first thing I would say is people in those situations, including us when we're in those situations, need an advocate, need someone to step in and say, don't you dare offer this. I'm watching. I love this person too much, and it would shatter them if they had that raised. So the more that you can preempt those conversations, the better, because there's no harm in preempting it and say, we're not interested. I interviewed a woman in Calgary who always discouraged her children from ever getting tattoos, but when MAID became legal, she got "Don't Euthanize Me" tattooed right on her arm.
Nice.
She shows it off to the doctors and nurses. They give her a thumbs up. People will respect you when you fight for your life. Miriam Lancaster, I posted a 1-minute clip of her telling her story about how she went on to travel the world after being offered MAID and saying no thanks. And the front page of the National Post, a Saturday edition, said, doctor offered her MAID, she had other plans.
Nice.
Great story, positive news story. So be the counterpoint, be the other story. People like stories of heroism and resilience. I think that's also a point I'd make, is that that's how we can appeal in an especially secular culture. If you ask anyone to think about any hero you admire, any book you like, any movie you like, tell me all about it, but omit any mention of suffering.
Right.
Falls flat. So I think we got to esteem the heroic, including in those who are bearing their suffering as well, and say, I see you. And what do you have to teach me? And what do you have to teach these healthcare workers about the value of their life? What would happen if this man said, upon being offered MAID, do you not value your life enough? To the doctor or nurse.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be interesting to turn it around?
Yeah, it would take incredible courage and wisdom on that part, but we can be that wisdom for them.
Totally.
People we love. Yeah, and I think last year our presenter was encouraging us to be that voice to the doctors right away. Someone had a good question about the content of this presentation. Are we recording this for people to watch later, Deb, or anyone? No? Yes. Awesome. Okay, so you can, if you slept through most of it, you can catch it again later. Awesome. Now, I was wondering, like what you just described, this, doctor offered MAID, she had other plans. Is that in your bio, it says viral political parody video. Is that what they're talking about?
Much earlier. That was.
Do you want to tell us about that one?
Yeah, well, when I was in undergrad, so a long time ago, there was this song that was popular at the time, Somebody That I Used to Know.
Okay.
Now you're just somebody that I used to know. So I rewrote the words and called it Some Party That We Used to Know, about a political party. So I was just I've been making videos a long time, and I have not hesitated from scrutinizing governments and that kind of thing. But yeah, making short films to give people a platform and has become my favorite form of kind of content. And I really am passionate about this intergenerational solidarity. I like very much how Pope Francis used to say that the alliance between old and young will save the human family. I think that's true. And Miriam was never going to go on Twitter. She doesn't even know she didn't even know what Twitter was. And she got 360,000 views of her little video when I posted it, telling her story, and went super viral. So that takes intergenerational cooperation to make it happen. Or Christine, who got the Don't Euthanize Me tattoo in her 80s. She was never going to advertise that really in this way. But now that video has been seen internationally. Jordan Peterson reshared it with the caption, "How to Protect Yourself in Canada If You're Elderly." So step by step, we can do that intergenerational cooperation that saves the culture.
Awesome. Make sure I'm not missing anyone's cards. Anyone else have a card they want to submit? Is that, okay. Ink is there. Okay. And okay, someone wants to more insight from your perspective, being heavily involved in government, to give us an understanding of the expansion.
In opposition, for clarity, in opposition.
Yes, not promoting it. Yes, opposition, which is, I think, what this person's hoping for.
Yeah.
To explain the expansion of MAID that's currently happening, just
Sure.
in case we're a little bit foggy on what's going on.
Yeah, it just reminds me because my mother would say, "Can I tell people that you work for the government, Amanda?" And I said, "Absolutely not. Tell them I work against the government." So once that got sorted out, I was working with a member in the opposition, especially trying to prevent the expansion of euthanasia on the basis of disability and mental illness. This was Bill C-7 several years ago. Well, in 2021, it passed. The law that passed did expand euthanasia on the basis of disability and mental illness as a sole condition. That law passed on March 17th, 2021. The first bill had the first bill was about euthanasia being expanded on the basis of disability, so-called Track 2, and the Senate said that doesn't go far enough because of equality. We know that there are people who suffer mentally just as much as physically, and so we will insist on it also extending to those for whom a mental illness is their sole condition. It passed, however, there was what's called a sunset clause, meaning that the mental illness as a sole condition would not take effect until 2023. Then at the 11th hour, that was deferred and delayed, and there were excuses made like, we're not ready, as if we could ever be ready to euthanize people who are struggling with the mental health. It was delayed again, as many of you know, to March 17th, 2027. But it's important for us to know that the law already passed. The question is, will there be an act of legislation to prevent its implementation? And as many of you are aware, there is a private member's bill put forward that would scrap that expansion on the basis of mental illness as a sole condition. And so there are efforts to meet MPs and sign petitions and support that. At the same time, there is a committee right now unfolding on Parliament Hill with witnesses from all different sides and perspectives. And they are studying the question of euthanasia for mental illness. And you can watch that. These are public meetings with the witnesses, and there are a lot of clips circulating on social media. Now, I'm going to warn you about something as pro-life leaders, and that is, given that MAID for mental illness has become so unpopular, thank God, in public discourse, and that all the experts seem to agree that this would be a terrible, terrible decision, I think that it probably will be stopped. That doesn't mean we can get lazy. But I do think that thankfully, by your efforts, by your advocacy, the government is getting the message that this is not a good idea, this is not popular. There is a new looming risk, though, about which I want to advise you right here and right now. On October 30th, 2024, Quebec began allowing MAID by advance request. This is euthanasia without consent. This is a policy of death for dementia. Because upon a diagnosis of dementia, if you still have the capacity to consent, then you can make a request ahead of time specifying that if at such and such a time and under such and such circumstances, you're no longer able to consent, just euthanize me. Advance requests are currently illegal in the rest of the country. But the federal government said to Quebec, we're not going to prosecute on this. In fact, not only are we not going to prosecute, we're going to do a national conversation, a survey on advance requests. And the results were overwhelmingly supportive for death for dementia. I think the demographic, apart from or in addition to the unborn, who will become the most gravely at risk are those living with dementia. And so I would encourage you, I would beg you, pro-life leaders, strategize, collaborate, and think and pray about how we can give a voice to those living with dementia and how we can help address the deep fears that make people think that they wouldn't want to live with it, the projection and the fear that goes into all of that. So that's what I kind of anticipate. Stay engaged, obviously, on preventing euthanasia for mental illness, but stay on guard about those living with dementia and the risk of euthanasia without consent.
Okay, that certainly gives me some insight. My dad has dementia, and I often visit him on Saturday mornings. But today I'm here. But I'm taking him to the pool on Tuesday, though, and so that's always a rich experience. And I love how my kids, sometimes look at me like, yeah, Dad, I like how you take care of your dad. Like, we'll take care of you when you're older. I'm like, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's good. And another question I had here was related to what you see as Canada's future in relation to euthanasia. And thanks for giving us a little bit of insight on that. Perhaps you might have a thought about this. Someone had more of a big picture question is, what do you think about our efforts being known as gift of life rather than right to life? If that would be a less confrontational, perhaps a more inspirational perspective.
Well, add it to the mix. It won't harm anything. Helping people to more deeply receive the gift that we are sounds good, especially because maybe rights get reduced to conceptions of autonomy and independence, whereas gift always implies a kind of a giver and a receiver and a mutuality. So to the extent that it can awaken heart for that, I think that's very good.
Awesome. Just want to confirm with Deb, how are we doing for time?
I think that's good.
That's it.
Okay. Awesome. And so once again, what's your website?
So it's dyingtomeetyou.com. I'll have some bracelets that have the website on it and that remind you that it's good you exist. So I'll pass those out. Sign up on the website. I don't email too often, but I email when I release new short films, and you can find the YouTube links for all these various videos. And like I said, there are a dozen of them out there, as well as podcasts and recordings and lots of material, more coming soon. So thank you all for what you do, for giving your time and your life to these issues, and for loving those in your life so well. God bless.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Amanda. Thank you.
Amanda, Rob's got a little token of appreciation for you from us, so thank you very much. Thank you. And I again, you reminded me of what I learned about you the first time I met you, about making this personal like relationship and stories and what we can do at a very deep human level. So thank you. I wanted to point out that our spring summer newsletter had an article in it about the advanced directives, contributed to by Dr. Kodelik as well. And the fall winter newsletters, we put some on your tables there, had information about Bill C-218, if you weren't already familiar. And to remind those who may have just arrived, the petition, you can sign the petition for Bill C-218 over by the billboards table. Okay, thank you so much, Amanda. And we're going to, if you're all okay, we're going to move into our local presentations. And so first on my list is the Gabriel Network.
Hello, everyone. Make sure you hug your grandparents or parents tonight. That was a heavy, heavy lecture. Alrighty, so as you heard, I'm from the Gabriel Network. It's good to meet everyone. I'd like to start with a bit of context. I wasn't part of the earliest stages of this. It was called the Gabriel Project back there, a subsidiary, or what we're trying to do is branch off of the Gabriel Project in the States. So I came into it later in a small meeting in a Tim Hortons on May Street. Just a few people sitting down together talking through something that clearly mattered. What stood out to me wasn't a polished plan. We didn't have that yet. It was the need. They were talking about women in our own community, women facing difficult pregnancies, and trying to navigate that without enough support around them. And the more I listened, the clearer it became. This isn't a rare situation. It's happening here, and it's happening more often than any of us realize. No one should have to go through that alone. And I'm here this evening to speak on behalf of the Gabriel Network, formerly known as the Gabriel Project, as a pro-life initiative connected with the Pregnancy Care Canada. The goal of supporting women in Thunder Bay and surrounding area who are facing challenging pregnancies is what drew me personally to this. It's not just an idea. It's something that was built carefully and responsibly. Early on, the group ran into real limitations. There was effort, There was intention, but there were also gaps in structure, training, and resources. That made it difficult to move forward in a sustainable way. That's where Pregnancy Care Canada comes in. They support a network of over 80 affiliated pregnancy care centers across the country. These are faith-based, and we also have their core principles printed off for you to look at there. Their mission statement is what stood out to us. Nonprofit organizations that provide free, voluntary support for things like prenatal education, marital assistance, and care after pregnancy, including post-abortion support. That means for us locally, we're not starting from scratch. We're building on a model that already works with guidance, training, and accountability built in from the beginning. The goal is to establish a local pregnancy care center that offers real, practical support in a place where women come, take a step back from pressure, and move forward with clarity. As we heard today, that's difficult to do because 60% of abortions are coerced. We learned that today. That's brutal. If you can prove to a judge that you signed a contract under duress or coercion, that contract is null and void. But we can't take that, we can't bring that baby back. The reality is this: not every decision is made freely, clearly. There are situations where women can feel cornered by circumstances or influenced by a lack of support around them. If that's the case, even for some, there's a clear need for something better. This isn't about debate. It's about making sure there is a visible, accessible support system in place. Right now, we're gathering information across Thunder Bay and the surrounding area through a survey to understand what services already exist and where the gaps really are that we hope to fill. We're also working toward becoming fully established with the goal of being ready to serve fully by next summer. But to get there, we need support. We're looking for people who want to be involved. You can sign up, whether that's through their time, their skills, or their experience. And we're also asking for financial support, of course, to help us build this properly from the ground up. Donations can be made by cash or check to Corpus Christi Church, directed to the Gabriel Network. If you're writing a check, you can simply note Gabriel Network in the memo line. Charitable tax receipts will be issued if you provide your contact information. If you'd like to learn more, we'd be holding a community meeting, and you could get an invitation from our table as well on Thursday, May 14th at 7 p.m. That is also at the same time as the march in Ottawa, we just realized today. So if you can't make it, that's okay. At the Oliver Road Community Center, it'll be available afterward as well. If you like to speak or ask any questions, because when someone finds themselves asking, where do I go from here? There should be a clear answer. And our goal is to make sure that answer exists. Thank you.
My name is Dina Routier, and I'm here to speak today about Rachel's Vineyard. How many people have heard of Rachel's Vineyard? Oh, perfect. Quite a few, actually. So it's an international ministry founded by Dr. Teresa Kaminsky-Burke, a Christian psychologist, and during her years of counseling, the word abortion kept coming up. So she saw a need to create something for people where they could heal. And she created a weekend retreat. And this weekend retreat reaches out to women and men who are hurting from past abortion decisions and other difficult pregnancy losses, such as miscarriage and stillbirth, and even the death of a child under the age of 2, such as SIDS or accident or illness or injury. The weekend itself is conducted by trained volunteers, and it's an experience where people can process their grief and begin to heal. The weekend itself is strictly confidential, loving, and judgmental. And in Thunder Bay, we chose an interdenominational approach, and the weekend is based on a component of biblical scripture exercises called living scriptures. The participants face the pain that they have, and with that pain comes grief and regret, and they experience the unconditional mercy of Jesus. The Thunder Bay chapter is celebrating their 10th anniversary this year, and our next weekend will be held in October of this year. The original weekend retreat occurred during the Catholic Church's Year of Mercy. From our beginnings to the present, we've held almost yearly retreats, and small group book studies are held on an as-needed basis. And during the COVID period, we were one of many sites that hosted an online virtual retreat. And this led to the formation of a group in Guam, and also one of our participants founded a group in Victoria, BC. Our leadership group continues to grow as former participants join the team. We've produced a public service announcement, which is available for viewing on our Facebook page, and we look for more ways to reach those in Thunder Bay and the surrounding area, knowing that grief from abortions is a well-kept secret, but also knowing that the secret can have detrimental effects on a woman's physical and emotional health years afterwards. And as Alex mentioned, and as the Right to Life has mentioned in the past, studies show that at least 60% of women share that they made a decision about abortion under some sort of pressure. And we suspect there are many people that could benefit from this weekend. We urge you to contact us and let friends know that Mary Jo at cocotbaytel.net or Terry at thoward@tbaytel.net are our main contacts. And the location of the retreat is kept confidential. I want to close by sharing a handful of comments that the past participants made. I can't believe I waited 42 years to experience this. The retreat was life-giving, the gift of joy from sorrow, and the gift of dancing from mourning. I never thought this could be possible. The retreat was a great and safe way to acknowledge and remember the lives of the unborn babies in a loving and dignified way. Amazing. What a blessing for all who experience pregnancy loss. It is undeniably clear that the team members care about each and every one of us, and they really do. The entire retreat vastly surpassed all my expectations. I hoped for a piece of healing, not to be healed, but I am. The retreat was really amazing, and I don't think I've even grasped yet just how amazing it was. I'm on a journey of hope and healing, and I now know joy and peace are possible after abortion. And the last one, I shed so many tears, I have my own lake. I can still feel the healing in my cells and in the core of my soul. The retreat was profound. Thank you.
Any questions then for any of those? Those are both programs happening locally, and it was for the first phase of the Gabriel project that we were collecting those items that somebody asked, why didn't, you ask for bringing diapers and so on. So they will get used eventually. Okay, they just changed paths. They're connected now with the, what is the group called? The overall Canada, Pregnancy Care Canada. So just like we're affiliated with AFLO, Alliance for Life Ontario, they now have an umbrella organization that will look after certain things for them. So that's awesome. Okay, good. Okay, and so I was going to ask next, Bonnie. Where's Bonnie? You're next.
Thank you to the Right to Life directors for giving me this opportunity to share about our group, Thunder Bay Against Abortion. We are an affiliate of CCBR, Canadian Centre for Bioethical Reform. Our vision is an abortion-free Canada. Our mission is to save lives. Abortion kills innocent human beings, nearly 300 per day in Canada, or 100,000 per year, making abortion the leading cause of death. Our strategy and all of our actions are aimed towards this goal, to end the killing. As an educational organization, we aim to make abortion unthinkable. In Canada, just like slavery, child labor, or segregation. We must change hearts and minds on abortion in order to save lives. Pastoral and political efforts are also necessary. Educating the public is essential to the overall success of the pro-life movement. Unless people see abortion as an injustice, they are unlikely to accept help through a difficult pregnancy or support pro-life policies. There are two essential pieces to the End the Killing plan. We must reach all mature Canadians with 1, abortion victim photography, and 2, human rights apologetics. We need to bring compelling evidence and clear reasons to change hearts and minds on abortion. We don't use abortion of victim photography because we like it. We use it because it works, and it works better than anything else. Victim photography and visual evidence has been essential to the success of social reform movements in the past. And we can see that abortion victim photography is the most effective educational tool to change hearts and minds on abortion. In 2015, CCBR commissioned an independent statistical analysis on the effectiveness of abortion victim photography and found that 67% of people feel more negatively towards abortion after seeing a photo of what it does to preborn children. Many pro-life leaders got involved in the pro-life movement after seeing abortion photos or videos, and most of the stories we have heard about babies being saved from our activism comes from people who saw abortion photos from a distance. Abortion victim photography saves lives, and that's why we use it. Thunder Bay is one of 28 cities in Canada that have an Against Abortion group. After my husband and I retired, I found I had time on my hands. I wanted to do something for the vulnerable unborn babies and their mothers using my gifts. I was familiar with the work of CCBR. I'd been on the Right to Life board when the abortion caravan came through Thunder Bay on its way to Ottawa and was involved in the planning for their activism in Thunder Bay. Terry Howard and myself joined them doing choice chain at City Hall and then at Bay Street. We did postcarding with them. I've heard their presentations at pro-life conferences, and I have read many of their books. My husband and I have supported interns from Thunder Bay who have volunteered for CCBR. The first intern we helped support was Francisco Gomez, whom some of you will remember. His wife is currently one of CCBR's directors. I enjoy walking, and I know that the delivering of postcards in city mailbox is time-consuming. So I thought, I have time. I can do this for CCBR. I shared my desire with my friend Kathy Zanstra, and she encouraged me and said she would help me. I contacted CCBR and told them I wanted to postcard. They sent us information, and we were very impressed with CCBR's professionalism. We received documents such as the postcarding protocol, which we needed to adhere to. Each volunteer needs to sign the volunteer agreement release of liability form. We were given the police interaction protocol, so we would know what to do should we run into an incident of physical abuse or of harassment. We also received a helpful document on the law in sharing the pro-life message. Everything was laid out for us, including our delivery routes. Kathy and I were excited to be a part of this, and Kathy immediately wrote up a request asking the Right to Life Association of Thunder Bay and area for support. Postcarding brings the truth about abortion right to people's doorsteps as we deliver postcards by hand directly into mailboxes. The postcards contain photos of healthy preborn children, photos of abortion victims, pregnancy help resources, and a concise case for human rights for all human beings. April 4th, 2023, Kathy and I delivered the first postcards for Thunder Bay against abortion. Currently, we are a group of 6 ladies. We have delivered the first 10,000 postcards and are working on our next 10,000. With every 10,000 postcards delivered, the 2015 analysis tells us that there are 6,700 more people in Thunder Bay who feel more negatively towards abortion. We are thankful to the Right to Life directors who have supplied us with our second 10,000 order of postcards. When we postcard, we are required to have a partner. We each have our phones on, ready to video should an incident occur, and ready with 911 number for physical abuse and the police non-emergency number for harassment. This project, unlike Choice Chain, which Corinne will be speaking about, is focused on efficiency and scale, getting as many postcards distributed as possible. When we postcard, we always keep each other in sight. If your partner gets too far behind you, you cross the street and help them catch up. When we are confronted by someone, we are trained not to engage, saying, "I'm obligated to keep going. You may call the number on the back to have your concerns answered." Our goal is to get postcards in mailboxes. CCBR staff is at the other end of the phone, and they can answer the questions so much better than we could. If a person wants you to come and take the pamphlet back, just call out to them to recycle it. We have never had to call the police, but my threatening to call the police once to a man who was harassing me was enough to calm him down, and I no longer felt threatened. Each and every incidence of physical abuse gets taken to the court by CCBR's lawyer so that no one can ever think they can get away with physical abuse of our volunteers. We prefer to postcard in the morning, giving parents enough time to empty the mailbox before the children come home. We try to keep it to 1 hour of postcarding. We love the exercise, being in the fresh air, and knowing that each postcard has the potential to cause someone to feel more negatively about abortion. Our city is divided into 40 maps. Our group has completed 5 maps, and we have 8 more maps almost completed. Our goal is to complete all 40 maps covering our city once, and then to once again peacefully and persistently continue to cover our city a second time. May God bless our efforts to repel people from abortion. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. This last week or so, I was wondering how I could be an encouragement to each of us. And I was thinking of the question, what is the chief end of man? Or what is our purpose? And it is to know God and glorify Him forever. With that, I'd like to read one psalm. It's Psalm 8. It's one of our favorites. I'm at that age where I need glasses. It says here in Psalm 8, O Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth. You have set your glory above the heavens. From the lips of children and infants you have ordained praise, because of your enemies, to silence the foe and the avenger. When I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have set in place, what is man that you are mindful of him? The Son of Man that you care for him. You made him a little lower than the heavenly beings and crowned him with glory and honor. You made him ruler over the works of your hands. You put everything under his feet, all flocks and herds and the beasts of the field, and birds of the air and the fish of the sea, all that swim the paths of the seas. O Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth. What I wanted to share was what was interesting as we just heard about euthanasia, that here, as you know, most of us are pro-choice and we're for the children and people who don't have a voice of their own. I find it interesting that in actuality, it looks like they're bookends in our culture from conception to old age, that we have death as what seems to be bookends. And when I look at that, I think, and why that is, I believe it's because our foundation based on God and the supremacy of God in our country has diminished. Green and I are very thankful for the opportunity to just share. We're thankful for the Right to Life here in Thunder Bay, who've supported us in what we have just been part of, and Green will go on from there.
Okay, thank you for this opportunity to speak. Martin and I received an email from Bonnie on this training in Florida. Now, this is something I've been wanting for a long time, to be trained. And this is through CCBR, as Bonnie was saying, Canadian Centre for Bioethical Reform. And they had a short course in Florida for a week, from February 6 to 13. And this we found and witnessed firsthand how effective that is in changing people's mind from pro-choice to pro-life. In that time that we were there, we had over 1,300 conversations. 367 of those people were already pro-life. 972 were not pro-life people. 262 people became fully pro-life. 152 became more pro-life. We had never experienced anything like this before. Having worked with pro-life organizations, trying to fight abortion, whatever, calling the MPPs, this was phenomenal. This program had 35 Canadians in Florida. 23 were in training, and 12 were in leadership positions. Driving down for Martin and I was glorious because we visited good friends we hadn't seen for some time. We also visited the Creation Museum and experienced the fearfully and wonderfully made powerful pro-life exhibit. If you have a chance to go see that, it's incredible. And it was a true highlight. En route, we passed this truck with a bumper sticker, abortion. One heart dies, another heart breaks. That just hit me. Here we are driving down to Florida to do this abortion awareness training, and seeing that was just like, how true, how very true. We don't often get to listen to the heart that breaks, and that should drive us on. I said to the man, like, we passed the truck, then we went to a gas station and he was there as well. And I said, I really like your bumper sticker. He didn't say too much. I just went off to the bathroom in the gas station and then came back out. And a woman was standing there and she said to me, did you just talk to my husband about the bumper sticker? And I said, yeah, I really like it. And she says, my mother conceived me in rape. I am so thankful that I have life, that she chose life for me. And she said she had me adopted, and I was adopted by a wonderful family. I now have 2 sons of my own, and I love music. And we're actually on our way to visit our son. He's in Florida. He's a chaplain, and he and his wife are in ministry there. And I thought, wow. So many people say, oh, you should have abortion for the situation of rape. To hear that, here's this woman saying something different. February 6th, we arrived at our destination and were directed to our accommodation. We spent the first Saturday in all-day training. We then spent 2 days on a university campus and 2 days on another university campus. And if you could show this video, that'd be great. Okay. What an experience. Each day we were on our way at about 7 a.m. and then at 8 we were setting up those large graphic images that you saw on the pathways, meeting students and conversing with them. My first day, I saw a man on a golf cart type of thing. He worked there, and he had just stopped and was staring at the posters and the big, huge images, and he said to me, and I walked up to him and I said, "Gross, eh?" He said, "That's abortion?" I said, "Yeah, that's abortion." "Are those photos real?" I said, "Yes, they are real. That shows you exactly what this is." He just couldn't hardly talk. He's like, "I work on campus. I hear stories of women saying they've had 5 abortions. How can anyone do that?" He was just appalled, and that was just the pictures. It was incredible. We have many stories to share. At 5 p.m., we would take everything down. We met in a circle, as you saw, for debriefing, and here people would share some of the day's highlights, challenges, stories from their day. Evenings were spent with a supporting church or at a supportive individual's home. You want to share a story about Albania? Martin has a story to share.
On one day, I was looking back at the placards that we had, and there was an older couple there. And I just finished a conversation, so I thought I'd walk up to them and introduce myself. And I said, "What do you think of the pictures and the display?" And he said he really appreciated it. And I said, "Oh, that's interesting. I don't think many people appreciate this." And he goes, we kept on talking. He goes, "Well, I'm 76 years old. My wife's 72 years old. We're students here. We spend six hours a week here, and I'm Albanian, and I'm a survivor of one of these." He said, "My mother went to have me aborted." And he said what he understood of the abortion and the attempt was that his mother had the doctor give her 2 needles, and for whatever reason, the 3rd needle wasn't given. And so it was a failed abortion attempt, and he'd shared with me how he had struggled with intestinal problems all his life, but in actuality, he really, really enjoyed life. One of the unique things about spending time at a campus with 50,000 students like Miami campus in Florida is that you have lots of opportunities to speak. And when people have a conversation like I did with this young couple, I encouraged them, are you involved in any form of pro-life movement? And they said, no. I said, Hadassah is just a new president here, and she's taking over for the student life body for a pro-life movement. Would you be interested? And he said, absolutely. His wife and him signed up, and we found out that we had signed up as a group 62 people as volunteers to this group. I was amazed.
On campus, we also had a speech board put up. And there, it was a great place to initiate conversations. People could write whatever they wanted on the board. And Martin had a conversation with somebody there.
There were lots of conversations that you can well imagine. This particular lady, I went up to the speech board and I said, what do you think? She goes, I like it. And anybody can write down whatever they wanted, for or against, and some slanders, some neat things, some praiseworthy things on there. And I said, do you have a favorite one? She said, this one here, I'm pro-life. I said, that's interesting. Have you spoken with somebody here? She goes, well, actually, she went on to tell me that last year she was here, the group was here, and she said she had a conversation with one of the staff, and she went home. And she was just so angry. She had cried and screamed for 45 minutes, and she was completely upset. And her mother went in to speak with her about what was taking place. And her mother had confided with her that she had an abortion. And so for the first time, she had learned that she was not aborted, and that her mother had to talk about abortion with her, and the reason why she would never do that ever again. It was a terrible experience for this Elizabeth's mother. And we had a good conversation. She also signed up to the pro-life student life body, and she had explained to me that she had lived in the United States for 22 years. They are immigrants from Russia, as a matter of fact, at that time, and they had. She had just been really curious to know more about God and was in that spiritual realm where she was trying to find out what truth is. So I had an opportunity to share a little bit more about the gospel and God's love for her.
So now where are we at? Having had that experience and coming back, we want to share that with Thunder Bay. We would love to see a course happening here where we're being trained, and anybody can be trained. And I would hope that you would share this with whoever you know, your family, friends, at church, and have people sign up. We would love to bring somebody in and train us. Martin and I only had 1 day of training. We can do that here in Thunder Bay as well. We can have a day of training and go out and start actively having conversations. It'd be great just to know how to speak to people, to change their minds. It works. That's the incredible part. This worked. This is the first time I found something that really worked. I've been wanting to change, like, abortion is wrong. How can we kill these children that can't speak for themselves? You know all the lines, but this actually works.
Just to explain a little bit more of the training, it would have to do with apologetics. Yeah, there's a video there. Tonka, are you okay to put that up? Basically, it follows three principles. We build analogies, or we build rapport, comfort. We common ground. We question, and then we provide analogies. So, and the end result is when you get this training, there's literally no reason, no excuse, no circumstance, anything for a female to have an abortion. It's a wonderful tool. I was impressed with it. Been opposed to abortion since Morgan Teller days. Here we have it, I think. If somebody were to ask me what didn't you like about the whole program or the week there, I would use the word activism. I didn't feel like an activist. I felt like an advocate, somebody who was speaking for the unborn, somebody who was speaking the love of God to people who needed to hear it. Activism is a little bit of a strange word for me. However, as we spoke with people at the universities, two different ones there, the comment that seemed to come back often was really appreciated your all of your people's level-headedness. There was nothing obnoxious. There was no angry people. There weren't angry debates. Yes, we did discover there were people with some really heated things about this. And yet, through the conversations and questions, we could lead them and quiet them down and help them to encourage them to think about what in reality takes place when you have 23 chromosomes from the seed and 23 chromosomes from the egg, making 46 chromosomes, which each of us are representing life at conception, and that each person from conception has a right to life.
Thank you. Do you have any questions?
Can they sign up if they're interested?
Oh, yes.
Absolutely.
Yes, we'd really appreciate if you would like to have more information, just sign up. There's a sheet available. Yeah, for the training, for whatever, like we'll contact you.
There's
Okay.
some good books there as well.
Yep.
Thank you, everyone.
Stuck is a good book. Thank you.
So we'd like to thank all these groups that are doing this local activism or ministry or all of advocacy, all of the work that they're doing. And Right to Life, we can't do all this, right? So we have certain things we do. We're about educating and so on, but we do support a lot of these efforts of these local groups. And so that's what we do. anyway, so that's it for the presentations part. You're welcome to peruse their tables, pick up information, grab a coffee. If you're going to stay for the Euthanasia Prevention Coalition, their latest movie is going to be shown now. It's about, I believe it's about an hour long. So grab a coffee, come back, and we're going to show the movie, and that's going to conclude our day. So thanks again for coming. Thanks to any of you that joined us part way. Thank you. Thank you.